Leadership is often talked about like it's a performance problem. Hit the goals, drive the results, push harder, move faster. But the reality is, many leaders today are carrying enormous pressure while trying to hold together teams that are overwhelmed, disconnected, or burned out themselves. And somewhere along the way, leadership became confused with control. The strongest leaders aren't the ones barking orders or driving fear-based performance. They're the ones who create trust, clarity, accountability, and alignment, especially under pressure. Today's conversation is about what actually creates sustainable, high performance inside organizations and why leadership isn't a choice between results and people. Welcome to Deals with Heels. I'm Debra, your host. Welcome to the show. Today's guest is Kathy Eastwood, creator of 3 Leadership Code and a leadership strategist with decades of executive experience across organizations like EY, Hewlett Packard, startups, and private equity-backed companies. Kathy's work focuses on a human-first approach to leadership, helping organizations build trust, alignment, and disciplined execution without sacrificing culture or burning people out in the process. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am really excited to have you here too and to talk about and pick your brain about all your wisdom and talking about leadership and growth and people and humanity is really my vibe. And so I'm excited for us to have this conversation. So let's talk just a little bit about why so many leaders unintentionally create burnout, distrust, or disconnection while they're trying to drive performance.
We all wake up with good intent. I'm going to be on it today. I'm going to be able to deliver results. But we all have so much going on at the same time. We've got our own personal challenges that are happening. The business is asking a lot of us. We're being asked to do more with less. And so every time we try to show up with good intention, we're just being pulled in a million different directions. And so it's not easy to be able to do the right things. And that's why I often say a lot of us know what we should be doing, but it's making sure that we prioritize the right things when we're being pulled in those different directions.
I always try to think about it from, I can tell, in my gut, I know this doesn't feel right and I'm still going to do it. And sometimes those decisions, you may have to make a financial decision, for example, that for maybe you have to reduce payroll. So you're having to make hard decisions in that regard. And that may be contrary to your own personal ethics. So you have that kind of disconnect within yourself. Do you see that a lot when you're...
Absolutely. It's interesting. I was talking to someone today and she's like, I know the right things to do. And she's saying this for the business. And I'm like, yeah, most people know the right things, but there's a lot of tough decisions that have to be made simultaneously that people may not know is happening. Making payroll is one of those that people take for granted, but a lot of organizations struggle where because of the cash flow, they don't know if they're going to be able to pay payroll. And so they're always faced with a ton of different decisions. And so you have to prioritize what's the most important at that time.
And how do you deal with that conflict from within, right? When I know this is going to hurt this person and that is definitely not what I want. Yet I have to make this decision. This is a hard decision to make, but I have to make it for the company and for it as a whole. How does a leader deal with those feelings when they have them? What are some tips for that?
Some of the tips is to really know yourself and build the relationships with people on your team so they understand what your intent is, right? Because you want to have some goodwill in the bank for when you're not going to be able to show up exactly how you want to be. And as you get to know someone and you're able to treat them well in the good times, and they get to understand who you are and how you show up, when you do something that doesn't seem just right, they're like, wait a minute, that seems off. There might be something else going on. But you can't constantly be doing things where it's not understood by others if you don't have that goodwill in the bank.
And I think sometimes people are afraid to build that goodwill because then it hurts you worse when you have to. Like, if I don't know you very well and I have to lay you off, that's easier than Kathy and I've been to dinner. I've met her family. I've done. Now it starts to have a different kind of a level of intimacy and it hurts me more, but it's so much better for the company and the team and for you. If you have that relationship, it's easy to reconcile those feelings, I think.
Well, I think when you're able to have honest conversations with someone to agree that we're all here for the team to deliver results, it's the job of the team to be successful. Right? It's the job of the leader is to help make sure that happens. If there's some tough decisions that we have to make, being able to put that in context to the bigger, greater organization while keeping attuned to that person's life, what's happening, right? Like you can still have a difficult conversation and treat someone with dignity and respect. You know, I
Absolutely.
I remember a story years ago when I was probably early on in my career, and it was the first time that I was going to have to lay someone off. And I was adamant that it was wrong and this was not the right thing to do. It was a big company. It was decisions were made in the bigger scheme of things, it made sense. But for me and for this person that was being impacted, I couldn't reconcile it. Went home storming, was talking to my dad, and I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to quit and I'm walking away from this. And he's like, all right, hold on a
Gonna
second.
die on that hill.
Yes.
I
And he's
bet
like,
dad
let's
go do
talk this through. And I'm like, but it's the right. And he goes, well, let's be honest. This person is unfortunately not going to have a job tomorrow, one way or the other. And you have a choice. You could be the one to have the conversation with them because you know them. You can come in and explain what's happening, why it's happening, make sure it doesn't feel personal, that it is the position is going away, not you. You can have that conversation. Someone else is going to come in and have it, and it's not going to treat them with the dignity and respect that they deserve. And I was like, and he said, oh, by the way, you're out of a job now, and you weren't able to then help them find the next job because the two of you are trying to figure out what you're going to do. That was game changing for me of how I looked at everything is when we shy away from the difficult conversations because we think we're protecting ourselves and we think we're protecting someone else, we're actually hurting everyone in that process.
Yes, we really are. Those are really hard conversations to have, and I see also and I see this in some studies that are coming out too where especially well, it doesn't it like not the CEO, for example, isn't who's being surveyed, but leadership within an organization and how they only about 25% really identify with the solutions that are being offered to problems in the company, and then they don't feel included in
Mhm.
the solutions themselves. And so that's often the fact when you're upset that someone's being laid off and you're at that middle management level, it's because they didn't include you in the rationale for that decision that's being made. What do
Mhm.
you recommend a company that's in that position? Let's face it, lots of companies are laying people off. And I have spoken to many, many people who were still at the company, right? And it was just handled poorly internally. They didn't have a big understanding of why that was happening other than just blanket statement, but how it affected and because they didn't feel included in whether it's the process or whether it's the understanding of the process.
Yeah. The, the best thing to start with is being able to clearly articulate what the vision is and what's happening. And that starts at the senior level, being able to, why are we doing this? What do we need? And what's going to be different at the end of this. I've worked with a lot of different leaders helping understand and craft that message. So you express that end vision so people can understand why and what's going to be different. Because by the way, a lot of people forget that it's not just the people that are impacted at that moment that unfortunately don't have a we have to also think about all the people that are staying,
Yes.
because they're feeling hurt. They're upset. Their best friend is no longer here. So, as an organization, as a leadership team, we need to be able to clearly express that vision of what's happening, the why, and then being able to cascade that down to every leader, every manager in that company, especially to the person that has to have that difficult conversation, because people want to understand why. That's our natural reaction. Why? And if we're not able to answer that ourselves, we can't expect the person having the difficult conversation to be able to have it. And so that's some of the coaching, is to make sure that you can clearly articulate it, cascade it down, and do training. I mean, it's not one of the best training sessions, but if you have to practice it and you're given you know, a, um, a script to be able to say, here's what you should say, here's what you shouldn't say, here's why you should say it, all of that, it helps people understand, okay, this is what I should do. But too often we're asking people to do something they've never done. Hopefully, they've never been through it even, so they don't even know what good or bad looks like, and walk into one of the most difficult conversations. And
And
so we need to spend more time training people to have difficult conversations.
one of the I worked with a client, and they were feeling they had laid off a lot of back end personnel because of AI automation taking that over. And when I met with their people, about the ones that were still there, about all the changes happening in the company, because they had a serious drop off in growth, and that wasn't what they were expecting that plateau to hit. They felt like it would be more streamlined and this was going to be a positive thing. All of the people that were still there said that their supervisors stood in front of them and read this note card.
Yeah.
And that's what, so they took the time to write down the words, but there was no connection. There was no humanity in it. There was no, let me connect with my people so they understand
Yep.
how this really is. What does this mean that I'm reading? How does that affect us in this department specifically? It was
Yeah.
a huge disconnect between, yeah, they notified, we talked about it in the people that were still here, but they didn't. They just stood and read a statement. And by far, I mean, every person that we interviewed mentioned that one thing. Every person said, I don't know. I don't really understand what happened, and I don't feel safe. I don't feel like my job is safe. I don't feel like I understand where we're going and how it's going to fit together now. And when we asked about, but they did, because they showed us their communication points that they trickled down through the organization. And they were like, well, they did read this thing, but I don't really remember what it said. Right? It's not, the connection was missing. How important is that?
I think it is the most important thing that we can do as leaders. Like, we're in a people business, and we're asking people to show up and spend a minimum a third of their life with us. And if we don't connect with them, they're going to show up and do the bare minimum, right? We have to
Yes.
remember what motivates us and be able to do that and provide that motivation for other people. You talked about psychological safety. That is, if you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of what we all need, we all want to feel safe. We all want to have a greater purpose, that we're doing something. We all want to grow. We want to feel included, right? We want to win. These are just natural human needs.
Humans need a purpose. We like to be helpful. We like to be included. We like to know the part we played in making it happen. For,
Absolutely.
for
And
me,
that's, as a leader, it's finding that understand. By the way, not all of us are the same, right? What
right.
motivates you and for me can be two different things. But as leaders, we have to figure out what that is and connect to the hearts of our people.
I had a really big eye opening. I raised 5 children, and 2 were my biological kids. And it was always eye opening. One, the similarities between, like, my boys are 4 months apart, one my stepson and one my son. And I had them their whole lives. They were 4 when we got married, so younger when we were dating. But it was also that they were very similar, even though they weren't related genetically. Also, the differences in how I had to motivate them.
Mm.
My daughter, I needed to ride her a little bit. She needed a little bit of kick in the booty to get going. But if I did that with my boys, oh no, that would never
Mm.
work. One would be so stressed out about it, and the other one would be bulled up and mad. And so
Mhm.
having that intimacy in just seeing, that's my thing, seeing that buying personality and that sale, like I'm really clued into that. And so that really helped me see you're clearly there with your
Mhm.
kids when you're even motivating them to get out of bed. Takes 5 different methods, 5 kids. And
Mhm.
so for teams, I mean, that don't live together and that don't, it is unique. And that connection is how you know what is going to
Yes.
keep this person up and what's going to lift them up.
Yes. And I think a lot of leaders feel that the easiest thing to do is just use fear as a motivator. Fear can work in a rare it does work sometimes, right? So I don't want to say, but that should not be your go-to, right? Like when we're using that, that's for an immediate response you need. There's an emergency, you need to get going. But we need to help people understand that that is not a long-term strategy for helping
No, it
drive
absolutely.
performance.
Yeah, people don't perform well under fear. And I think there's always a general kind of fear that individuals have about losing their job, about losing their livelihood. There's always a worry about it. I mean, there's some people that go around oblivious and don't realize that they're not doing a good job. But I think the majority of people have maybe an unhealthy fear of it that prevents them from really cluing in and feeling close and identified in that company and understanding their purpose to the overall sales cycle. We're all here on a for-profit company to sell something. I'm a sales culture specialist, and so boy, most people don't have any idea how they fit in the enterprise growth cycle of the company.
Yeah.
And when they do identify that this is where, and without you and without this department, the sales cycle is broken. When they
Yes.
do, it's so empowering. So empowering when they figure it out and they're like, I am critical. It's like it during COVID, you had
Yes.
to be on the list where you could work if you were a critical employee. And in the enterprise sales cycle, all of you are critical to the part. If you're not here, then there's a gear broken and we have to figure
Absolutely.
out a way to do it. And when they see that, then they really feel like, okay, I'm not just a payroll clerk. What I do is really, really critical to selling things, even though
Yes.
I'm not the one with my butt in the chair asking for the sale because no one wants to be that person.
Yeah. Well, I always love the story, the fable where, and I don't think it's a fable, but it was a real story of someone asked the janitor at NASA in Kennedy Space Center what his role was and what his purpose was. So this is the janitor cleaning the bathroom. And he's like, my job is to get a man on the moon.
Yeah.
Right? So everybody in an organization, that was their purpose, was to get a man on the moon. To your point, everyone is critical in that cycle. And when you have everyone thinking about bigger purpose and less about themselves and less about what they're fearful, then they're bringing their whole self to the workspace. They're trying to think about, what can I do differently? How can I innovate? How can I make this better? And they're not waiting to be told what to do.
Right. They are waiting to be told, "Hey, we have a problem in customer experience, and somehow, we're getting really bad reviews and we don't know why because they're all
Hmm.
disconnect." Whatever that disconnect is, when people are bought into it, they find solutions because they
Yes.
care.
Yes. Great.
We talked a lot about A lot of that happens under performance pressure. We feel all this pressure to succeed and to sell and to bring results. And often that creates tension and friction within the organization. How can leaders balance accountability and results without losing the humanity of the people that they're leading?
It really starts first with helping everyone understand the purpose, right? When we can express that end vision, difficult conversations later on are easier, right? Like when we say, here's what good looks like, here's what your role and responsibilities are, here's what I need you to do, and then get agreement. It's one thing to state it, but if you get buy-in and people are engaged in that and bought into it, now you have clarity of what you're doing, confirmation of that. Now that conversation, if someone doesn't perform, doesn't meet the expectations, now the conversation is more, hey, we agreed upon this. Do you remember? Oh, yeah. You didn't accomplish it. No. And then the question can be why? What happened? What do you need? Did you have the training? Did you need something personal come up? So now you're problem solving rather than trying to place blame or make them feel bad. Goal is to get everyone focused on how do we execute and get this done. So from experience, it really starts with making sure everyone's on board and has that clarity. Then the ownership is a lot easier because people are already assuming it. Oh, yep, that's mine. There's nothing worse than when someone comes to you and says, you're not performing to my expectations. Well, I don't know what your expectations are.
Exactly, because I'm coming to work. I'm here every day. I'm doing the little steps that I'm supposed to do. Or they get told something, well, you're not going the extra mile. What exactly does that mean, the extra mile? I stayed late when you asked me to,
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
suddenly is evolved about time. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we get really focused on the trading hours for dollars and I'm putting in my
Yes.
time and not understanding how much more important what we do during that time is. And it's such a big deal. Control is not the same thing as leadership.
Agreed. I was talking to, it was a controller, funny enough, in an accounting group, and we were doing performance management. And I said, so how do you think your accountant is doing? And he's like, "Oh, definitely not meeting my expectations." So my next question was, well, what are your expectations? Well, they're an accountant. They should do their job. And I said, give me more specifics here.
Right? There's a wide
Exactly.
variety of things accountants do.
Exactly. And how do you want it done? Right? Because how she might have done it in the past may not be the same as you want it. And he kept looking at me like I had four heads. And I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. Let's be very explicit on this. So he went back and he sat down with her and said, here are my expectations. I need you to improve X, Y, and Z. And then if you need help, I'm here to help. So the next performance review comes along. I said, how are things going? Oh my God, she's overachieving. Same person,
Hmm.
same job, goes from not meeting expectations to exceeding expectations simply because the expectations were expressed.
Yes. Yes.
Not hard. And we spend more cycles because we don't clearly express it. And then people aren't meeting our expectations. We're not
And we can't
guessing. We fill the vacuum.
yes, we can't get good help. Right?
Yeah.
It gets
Yep.
blamed on the individuals. I had something similar with a client that I was coaching as an individual, and she was in like a mid kind of man, just, I don't know, probably 20 to 30 employees, and she's like a mid high level manager. They don't have a lot of high level management yet, right? So it's
Hmm.
kind of all, and she was frustrated in her mind, what she could see, she was doing a fantastic job, right? She's meeting all the goals. This I can't understand. I said, well, what, in your reviews, what are you hearing? How's he communicating? Because they know each other well. That was one of the things. They know each other well. And she said, well, he tells me that he doesn't trust me.
Mm.
Like he trust, and then, and so when I say, what do you mean? How come you don't trust me? The answer was, well, you're like, I've known this person, or it was a comparison to other people. And so I suggested, well, when he says he doesn't trust you, the question is, what specifically am I doing in my day to day activities that's not building trust with you? Now he has
Yeah.
to tell you specific things that you've done that have made him question his ability to trust you. And you're
Mhm.
not doing it in a way where you're defensive. You're doing it, I want to be better. Please help me understand what I'm doing or not doing that's
Mhm.
generating this feeling of mistrust. And boy, she is flourishing. Just forcing it, those are hard discussions for a leader to have. I said, don't let him get away with telling you something vague like that.
Yeah.
Because that's the easy way. That's him just being and making you go be more trustworthy when you're on. There's nothing untrustworthy about you as a person.
Right.
So don't let him get away with that. That's a rather passive aggressive way of addressing the issue instead of directly telling you, hey, when you do this and you interact with the clients and now they're calling me,
Mhm.
instead of working it out with you, that makes me think I can't trust you. And so you can't expect somebody to improve with a blanket statement like that. Especially when, I mean, if they're stealing, they're going to know why you don't trust them. But
Right.
she was feeling as though she was performing. And I said, so if he's having this feeling, there's something missing. He's
Yeah.
not, right? You have to be willing to humble yourself to say, okay, there's obviously some disconnect somewhere
Yeah.
where something's off, or he wouldn't be having the conversation with you. You have to trust that. So now dig in and ask the questions. And boy, once she did, she knew exactly. He had no problem telling her what she asked him. Well, okay, because it forced him to think about it rather than
I
just
think
talk about the feeling.
right. And I think we have a tendency to assume often that everyone processes the same way that we do.
Mhm.
And we are all, there's a lot of similarities, but we were saying it at the beginning, right? We're all different. What trust means to you and to me are two different things, and someone can break my trust simply by being late to a meeting. Where someone's like, what's the big deal? You'll break my trust if you don't deliver on what you said. The words are more important. And I'm often coaching people to understand for themselves first awareness, right? Knowing yourself. How do you like to show up? How do you like to communicate? What inspires you? What is trust to you? Because you need to first understand who you are and how you show up so that you can then look for those signs in other people and then start to ask them what's important to you. How do you like to communicate? Do you like emails? Do you like text messages? Do you like face to face? I mean, all of these conversations is what builds those relationships and you can learn. You mentioned
Yes.
earlier, like if you're not in that workspace, if you're not at home 24/7 to learn by observing, you have to be explicit and asking those questions and having the conversations up front. I know that has been game changing for me in my relationships and in leadership is just asking questions.
And being genuinely curious. That was so I had a thing, I could try to have a goal overall.
Mhm.
And for 2025, it was listen with curiosity. And because I am a naturally curious person. And so framing it like that helped me really tune into that part of me that is already there. And it really can help you grow your relationships professionally and personally. But for me to slow down and listen and really key on my curiosity, well, it can annoy people too when you ask, but from a leadership perspective and from a business owner and a sales perspective, being curious is so
Mhm.
important to get the information you need to connect with that person, to understand how they like to be communicated with. Buying behavior is a big part of what I do in sales psychology. And so you really nailed it. Having that, how do they like to be communicated with? How do they build trust? What makes them lean in and listen and want to learn more? And what makes them lean back and maybe shut the door? It's
Yeah.
so important from your team person than it is just as important for your team as it is to your buyers to be able
I,
to connect with them.
I agree, Deborah. And, I've been in sales for a lot of my career started in sales. And I have seen the similarities of I think all salespeople need to be leaders. Because when I think of what leadership is, it's about getting people from point A to point B. And you're looking to influence them, to help them see a new vision to be able to what we're trying to accomplish. And in sales, you are influencing people. And so you need to understand your customer. It's no different than your team member. You have to build the trust. You have to have the relationships. So I think what you're doing is so important is helping people understand that as in sales, you are a leader and one of the most important leaders in an organization.
Yes. And, sales, my audience has heard me say this so many times. This basic level sales is a transfer of enthusiasm. If I
Oh, I
can
love that.
connect with you and build trust, I can transfer my enthusiasm to you. And if I don't get a sale, I can get a referral because you
Hmm.
understand and I was able to transfer it. Boy, is that statement ever so true with your team. If I
Yes.
can sell you and transfer the enthusiasm about what we're doing as a company and why we're selling the products and services we're selling and how they help people and how you specifically fit in to
Yes.
that overall process of what we're doing. Now I can transfer my enthusiasm for that as a leader down to the people that work for me, and then they can transfer it in their own way down. That statement works so well with what you said. I had to say it again. Audience, I don't want to hear about how often I say that because it's true. But it is. And boy, you you really explained that so well that it fit perfectly in. Well, we've got to start wrapping it up. For leaders that are listening who feel pressure to produce results and they're trying not to burn their teams out, they can feel it right now. Employees everywhere don't feel loyal. They don't have loyalty. They don't feel like they can trust. I mean, there's a lot of big disconnect out there. So for the leaders in particular that often don't have control on those big decisions, what's the one shift in leadership behavior that can immediately change and start building trust amongst their team?
It would be taking the time for to be aware. So self-reflection is a big thing. Really to know yourself, who you are, what your purpose is, what your behaviors are, what your preferences are, so that you can become very comfortable with yourself and you know your values and you can be true. I've met a lot of different folks that feel they have to show up a certain way to be a leader and to engage with others. But the truth is, you need to be yourself and you need to understand who you are, how you show up, and then understand how others show up. So that's where that awareness is who you are, how you show up, how you're perceived, right? Just because the way you think you show up doesn't mean that's how you're perceived. But then look to communicate and speak other people's languages so that you're connecting with them and you're able to motivate them based on how they want to show up. I think that is the most important thing that I've found for leaders to get comfortable because then you know what your intentions are. And so when the stress starts to come in, you go back to who you are. And okay, why am I here? What am I doing? And how am I going to help us get to where we need to get to?
And you guys, that is where emotional regulation comes from. That inner clarity, knowing where you are, that safe space within yourself. Now, when it starts hitting the fan like it does, it's inevitable, it's going to at some point in time. You're able to not lose your mud, be emotionally regulated, and connect and really guide your team through it in a way that's not reactive. I know that I have listeners out there that are really excited to connect with you. What are the best ways they can connect with you and learn more about your services?
Sure. The easiest way is you can go to kathyeastwood.com. And in there, you can learn more about my focus on the E3 Leadership Code, which is helping leaders balance the need to express and envision, engage their people, and execute, all powered by emotional qualities. So they can learn
Fa-
more about that at kathyeastwood.com.
Fantastic. Social media, are you active on any of that?
I am absolutely on Instagram is Kathy Eastwood Leadership and LinkedIn. You look me up under Kathy Eastwood as well.
And I will link to all of those things in the show notes, everyone. Thank you, Kathy. What a great episode and conversation that we've had. And if this conversation resonated with you, if it challenged how you think about leadership, decision making, or the pattern shaping how you grow your business, then my work lives beyond this podcast in your growth. Thank you. My work really focuses on helping leaders and organizations slow down and identify what's actually breaking beneath the surface and build sustainable growth grounded in clarity, trust, and alignment. You can learn more about that work at thegrowthvanguard.com. And if you're interested in going deeper, I've included links in the show notes to a couple of free resources you can download, like the Human Cells Playbook and 5 Signs Your Growth is Breaking. Those will all be with Kathy's information that you can download as well in the show notes. Kathy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your vast amount of wisdom in corporate leadership and how we can better grow. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Until next time, everyone, stand strong in your power, especially when it gets uncomfortable. See you next week.